Hi friends! In this video, I'm going to share with you the story of my estrangement from my 3 adult daughters. I previously told the story of what happened with my mother and my 2 brothers, and this is the story about what happened with my 3 daughters. My name is Jana and I'm 67 years old and I am estranged from my entire family. I said I was going to tell you about what happened to cause this, but I truly don't know what happened, which leaves me with a lot of speculation. My story of what happened with my daughters is a very long one, and in the interest of time, I'm going to try to condense it as much as possible. Please, if you need me to clarify anything, just ask in the comments. It all began back in the year 2015, and at the time I was living in Ohio and my 2 oldest daughters were living in Florida, where they are still living. My youngest daughter was also living a few miles away from me in Ohio. Now, I do have a lot of notes, so I hope you don't mind if I occasionally look down. The reason I have notes is because I don't want to leave anything out, and I want to make sure I give the important points so as not to confuse you guys. So earlier that year in 2015, I made the really difficult decision to move from Ohio to Florida. I had just ended a very toxic 12-year relationship, and I also wanted to be closer to my grandchildren, and at that time I had 3 grandchildren. So the plan was that when I got to Florida, I would spend 3 months first with my middle daughter, and then I would move over to my oldest daughter's home, who lived very close, and I would spend the next 3 months with her while I got my feet on the ground. I very much recall a phone call that I had with my middle daughter prior to me moving, and in that phone call I had asked her if, while I was living in her home, if she would please let me know if that I was doing anything wrong when I was staying with her, or not doing something that she wanted me to do. I stressed that communication was key, and I know her personality type is a little bit particular, and I was trying to prevent any potential problems that could arise from, living with your adult child. When I got to Florida, my plan was to job hunt. In fact, I considered that my job. My job was to job hunt. And I did find a job rather quickly, within 2 weeks. Now, this job was, had very long hours. I'm talking, I was gone away from the home for 15 to 16 hours a day. I was leaving in the dark and getting back in the dark. And when I would get back to my middle daughter's home, my young granddaughter would typically be in the bathtub, and I would go straight into the bathroom and spend time playing with her, and then I would help tuck her into bed for the night. And after that, I would get myself something to eat, I would shower, and I would go to bed myself just to start over the very next day. I was pretty stressed out, in addition to, an entirely new lifestyle change, moving across the country in a new job and leaving the toxic relationship that I was in. My ex had decided to sue me. And when she found out that I sold my home, I was in the contract phase of selling it, she managed to put a stop on the sale proceeds. So the money that I had planned on getting from selling my home that I was going to use to start over in Florida was withheld from me. So that just added a whole other level of stress. My middle daughter at the time, she was also pregnant with her second child, and things seemed to be fine in her home. I helped her set up her nursery. I took care of her daughter while she was in the hospital having the baby. She did stress to me on more than one occasion that she didn't expect me to be a babysitter. She didn't want to feel like she was using me in the same way that she felt her sister, my oldest daughter, was using her mother-in-law to take care of her children. And I thought that was kind of odd, but I just let that go. The job that I had gotten was seasonal, and so unfortunately, right after Christmas, they let me go. And there was one day when my daughter took me aside and told me how she supported me. She wanted to let me know how she supported me, and she understood all the stress I was undergoing with this move and everything, and which I thought was really nice because my family aren't really that kind of talkers, so I thought that was really nice. Never during those 3 months with my middle daughter did I suspect any type of issues. And so then it did come time for me to move over to my oldest daughter's home, and that went well. I was again job searching because I had been let go from my seasonal job. And again, I found a job, a couple jobs really, rather quickly. And things seem to be going pretty well. My oldest daughter is a lot more easygoing than my middle daughter, and I felt very comfortable with her. I was no longer gone 15 hours a day, so because of that, I did have more time to spend at her home with her and her family, and I helped quite a bit with her children when her and her husband couldn't. Like picking them up from daycare and school and stuff like that. So fast forward to about the spring of 2016, I was still living with my oldest daughter. And my youngest daughter, who was still back in Ohio, she decided to also move to Florida, and I was just thrilled. I was thrilled to death. I would have all 3 of my girls in Florida, and I thought it would be just great. And my family is not a close one, so I actually thought this move would bring us all closer. And like me, my youngest daughter also had to temporarily stay with her sisters until she could secure a job. And she had some consideration over which sister she would stay with, and she ultimately chose to stay with her oldest sister, my oldest. And the reasons for that mainly was because my oldest had a bigger home and as such had more room in her home. Now, the pivotal day. So the day my youngest got to Florida, I was over at my middle daughter's home, and my youngest daughter decided to come over there because we would all be there, and we were waiting for my middle daughter to return home from work. And when she got home, she had this obvious coldness about her. It was really strange. I was really confused. I was like, what the heck? Like, I really didn't know what was going on. And she was mad. She was mad at both me and her younger sister. Come to find out later through subsequent conversations with her and my youngest, my middle daughter seemed to have a lot of jealousy going on. And she had made a comment about how I was posting more photos of her older sister's children on social media than her kids. She made a comment about how I was closer to the youngest daughter than with her. And to me, it just seemed like, well, the youngest lived near me in Ohio, so of course we would see each other more often, right? Maybe she was mad that her younger sister decided to stay at her older sister's home instead of her home. I don't know. I'm just speculating, and I still really don't know why, because I've never gotten any of my questions answered. And that was just the beginning of several months of ridiculous shit. I remember her calling me one day and just screaming at me, and I don't remember the reason why. And after that, there were several in-person visits and phone calls where we attempted to discuss whatever the issue was, and I never got any answer. The closest she ever came to explaining why she was so angry is that she told me that I was not meeting her expectations. And then in the same breath, she also said she felt her expectations were too high. So it was really confusing to me. My only goal throughout this time was to really listen to her, to really try to understand, to try to change myself, to rectify whatever behavior of mine that she wasn't liking, to make her happy. One time she did say that she wasn't happy about the fact that I didn't just drop in more. And that's very much out of my comfort zone to drop in on anybody, unannounced, anybody, family or otherwise. But I really wanted to try on my end. So one day I did just that. I dropped in, and she did not happen to be home. Her husband was home and with the baby. And so I visited with them for a little bit, and then I left. Well, later on, she got really, really angry about that. And it was like, how dare you come visit when you know I'm not home? Well, she's a teacher, elementary school teacher, and it was after school, and I fully did expect her to be home. She had happened to have a birthday party or something to take her daughter to after school. I didn't know that. To me, it wasn't any big deal, but apparently it was to her. There was never any respectful conversation with her. I would try to be respectful and listen, but I would not get that in return. There never has been in my family, not with my mom, not with my brothers, not anybody in my family, not even with all the silent ones who just choose to judge me based on what they hear. So with this middle daughter, she was exhibiting what I've come to call her Jekyll and Hyde behavior. There was one instance, for example, where she had asked me to babysit so her and her husband could go out on a date night. And I was excited and thrilled because she had never done that before, because like I said, she had mentioned how she didn't want me to be here to babysit, but I was excited. And a few days before, we were talking and planning the final details, times and such for me to babysit. She suddenly blurts out, "Forget it. I'll get somebody who cares." And that was the end of that. And I was not allowed to babysit. Another example, there was a dance recital for my two granddaughters, her daughter and my oldest daughter's daughter. And I had a girlfriend at that time, and even though my middle daughter and I weren't really speaking much, I introduced my girlfriend to her, and she just was surprisingly super happy, super friendly. "I'm so glad to meet you. I've heard all about you." And I thought, oh, maybe she's over whatever that anger that she's had all these months. So when it was time to leave, everybody was hugging goodbye and stuff, and I went to hug her, and she abruptly pushes me away like real nasty in front of a bunch of people, and it was so humiliating. And I cried the entire way back home. I think the final straw for me was the day I went over to her house. I needed to collect some mail that I had left there and such. And while I was there, we were finalizing the details of Grandparents' Day at the elementary school where she taught as a teacher and my granddaughter attended as a student. I was going to go to Grandparents' Day, I believe it was that Friday, and I was super excited about going, and my granddaughter was super excited, and we got all the details finalized. And at one point my daughter asked me if I could stay for dinner, and I had to decline because I had to go to work, and I was getting ready to leave. But before I left, she said, "Can I talk to you before you leave?" And I said, "Sure." So we walked around the corner to a adjoining room, that's wide open, probably only 10 feet away from her kitchen bar where my young granddaughter sat. And my daughter very angrily said something to me to the effect about, "Why didn't you come visit me in the hospital?" Well, she had been in the hospital for a kidney stone or something, and I didn't know she was in the hospital and only found out when her husband made a Facebook post about it. So I tried to explain that I didn't know she was in the hospital, and she just started screaming. It was crazy. It was from friendly, inviting me for dinner and finalizing plans, to screaming at me, and I was in such shock. And I walked out of the room over to my granddaughter. I didn't know what to do. I gave her a hug and kiss and told her I loved her and said, I'll see you Friday for Grandparents' Day. And my daughter came storming after me, and she said, "If you dare show up, I'll call security on you." And I can't even explain to you how that made me feel. I could not get out of there fast enough. I was shaking. I was in shock. I walked as quickly as I could out to my car. And do you know, my daughter literally chased me, screaming, out to my car. And I can't remember all the stuff that she was saying. She did make one comment that I remember, something about, "Well, your ex has moved on, why haven't you?" And I thought later, well, that's really weird. How would she know if my ex has moved on, or what brought that up? That was weird. And up until this point, I had always been very respectful and tried to reason with her, but I lost my cool, and I blurted out something about, "You should talk in lieu of what your husband did," referring to something naughty that he did early in their relationship. And I had to roll up my window because she was really coming after me. I've never seen that kind of behavior like that in her or any of my daughters. So I drove back to my oldest daughter's house where I was living, and I sobbed the whole way. I don't even know how I got back there. I was just crying so hard. Sometime after that, I wrote her a letter, an email, and I don't remember what that email says. I think I probably still have it, and I won't look at it. Not until I'm in a better place, because it triggers so much. But I do remember at the end saying something about, what is she teaching her children, and I'll respect her wishes and stay away if I don't hear from her. And I never did hear from her. I do know that she received that letter because my youngest daughter told me that she received it. Oh, one more thing I thought about, after the estrangement was final, I was having a party in the place where I was staying at the time. This was, I'm not sure when, later on. And she had allowed my oldest daughter to bring her daughter, my granddaughter to the party with the stipulation that I don't include her in any of the photos that I took, which is really weird because how do you like take a group photo of all the family, everybody except one little girl, and say, honey, you can't be in this picture? Or blur her face out so she sees it at some time in the future with just her face blurred out. I mean, that was crazy to me. So that's a long story, and I think now's a good time to move on to the estrangement that happened next, and that was with my oldest daughter. Give me a moment to take a deep breath because this is a really hard video for me to make. I'm shaking. Okay, so the oldest daughter was living at her home and during the time of the estrangement with my middle daughter, and we had many conversations. Me, my oldest daughter, her husband, and my youngest daughter. We had many conversations sitting around the table about my middle daughter's behavior and how confusing that was to all of us. But there were no issues staying with my oldest daughter. I felt comfortable there. I helped her as much as I could with the kids in the house. I was still stressed out. You know, my money was still being withheld from me, so I didn't really feel like I could move on. And it had really only been a few months since I moved across the country, and it takes a while to adjust to something like that. I mean, everything was different in my life. I no longer had my own home. The job I had in Ohio, I was self-employed, and now I was working for a boss and still trying to heal from that toxic relationship and all that kind of stuff. In April of that year, 2016, the company that had let me go due to it being a seasonal job asked me to come back permanently, and I did accept that, and I went back. The only thing now was that I went back and it was a night shift. A couple months after that, I was able to get my own apartment, and actually my youngest daughter moved in with me. We shared the apartment, and let's see, fall of 2016, I met my now wife, and about a little over a year later, in the fall of 2017, we got married. And when my lease was up on the apartment, we moved together to a place an hour away. And the reason for that, for moving an hour away from where my girls were and my apartment was because we were both working at the time, and my wife had lived like 2 hours south, so we had to pick like a middle ground between where my apartment was and where her home was, because we still both had to commute to our jobs. So because of that, I wasn't able to see any of my girls nearly as much as before, especially working night shift and when they worked day shift. So it was really hard to get together. Then one day, my oldest daughter sent me a message on Facebook Messenger, and she was mad at me because I don't even know how to explain it. I wasn't doing what she wanted me to do in regard to her daughter's birthday. I was on my way to work, the night shift, and I knew my granddaughter was in school, so I asked my daughter to tell her happy birthday for me, and I would talk to her later. And that really angered her because she wanted me to tell her in person, and it wasn't possible. And then when I inquired as to when I could, she got even more angry at me, insinuating that I know damn well when she's home. And I didn't, but she wasn't going to listen. I think something clicked in me because it had gone on months and months and months with my middle daughter, of all the disrespect while I was trying to sit back and please her and do what she wanted and go out of my comfort zone. And I'm like, when this daughter got all disrespectful, and I tried to talk to her decently about it, and she continued her disrespect, I'm like, you know what? That's it. I'm not dealing with this. And I just left the conversation. And that, I believe, is the last time I spoke to her. Later on, I had learned that my wife, unbeknownst to me, had messaged my oldest daughter asking her about what the heck was going on. And my daughter told her that she was sick and tired of me always feeling sorry for myself, which I felt was really weird. And that'll be another topic I'll talk about in a future video. But that didn't even have anything to do with her getting angry at me over the birthday stuff. I think the birthday thing was just an excuse for her anger over something deeper. With both her and my middle daughter, their anger just came totally unexpected and out of the blue. And with my younger daughter, it happened more gradually. The estrangement with my youngest daughter is very recent, just actually a few months ago. But it really started back in 2016 when my middle daughter, like I said earlier in this video, she was angry at both me and her younger sister. But there was a day where all of a sudden my middle daughter seemingly forgave my younger daughter, and my younger daughter was back in the fold again while I was still out. So one day, as I was driving to work, night shift I was on at the time, I was on the phone with my youngest daughter, and I questioned her about, well, what did you say to your sister, or what happened to cause her to be happy with you again? I mean, I really wanted to know, because I just been racking my brain what I could do, what I could say to rectify things, and I wasn't getting anywhere. So I was genuinely curious what happened to bring the two of them close together again. And my youngest got angry at me, and here we go, out of the blue, this anger again. And she said that, well, she accused me of not being happy for her that her sister was now accepting her. And that wasn't it at all. I just really wanted to know. And then she angrily said, don't put me in the middle. I'm not going to be placed in the middle. And this anger from her was just so out of the blue. And she was the daughter I was probably closest with, being the youngest. She is 12 and 15 years younger than her older sisters, and did spend quite many years living with me as a child, more like an only child, because her older siblings were already out of the house. And then, she lived near me in Ohio. Like I said, this wasn't like her at all. And again, I found myself in tears, like, what's going on? And so I just dropped it. It was just like a taboo subject. She told me, not to put her in the middle, so I didn't. And at the time, she also worked for the same company I did, so I would see her sometimes in the lunchroom. And there was one day in the lunchroom when she was having some big issues, some personal issues, and I said something, and she got really angry and snotty with me in front of a bunch of my coworkers and stormed off. And so there was that anger again that I had never seen. It was just so weird. Things seemed fine on the surface. We never talked about it. And then fast forward to, like when I said my wife and I moved an hour away, there was one day when her and her boyfriend came to visit us. And we're sitting at the table chatting, and she made a comment about how I seemed to be in a bubble, which I thought that was really weird. You know, what does that mean, I'm in a bubble? Does it mean, you know, that I live an hour away and we don't see each other often? I mean, that was something that went both ways. You know, I wasn't getting down there often because I was on the night shift, and she wasn't coming here either. And then also during that same conversation, sitting at my table, something came up about her middle sister, and she started tearing up. And then she blurted out something about how she wasn't allowed to tell me about it. And my anxiety completely like hit the ceiling. Like, okay, something's wrong. Something must be horribly wrong if she's tearing up and she can't tell me something horrible about her sister. So later on, you know, I did some social media snooping and found out that my middle daughter was diagnosed with a serious illness. And apparently she had told people not to tell me about it. So yeah, there's that. So then what happened with my youngest? There was definitely a disconnect. I felt it. We weren't seeing each other much. Neither one of us were texting, very, very occasionally. And there was one day where, out of the blue, she texted me all friendly and happy, and she said her and her boyfriend purchased a home, and we're so excited. And then she enclosed some pictures and was all excited about that. And I thought, wow, okay. I was shocked because I didn't have any idea that she was buying a home. I didn't even know where she was working at the time, if she was working or anything, because she had quit the job where I was working. I was happy for her, of course. You know, we all want our children to succeed and be happy. And so I congratulated her, and I told her that we would have to come see the house after she got settled. But I never did. And that's my bad, totally. But here's why I didn't. If I'm totally honest, I did not feel welcome. I had totally planned on texting her at some point and asking when a good time it would be for us to come. But after that message from her about the house, my wife and I went on 2 vacations. Shortly after, we took a 2-week trip to Costa Rica, and when we returned the next month, we took a very long road trip. Now, my wife and I are very much homebodies, so now that we were both retired, these were a big deal to us. And I posted a lot on social media about these trips and photos and videos, and my daughter never commented, liked, or anything. Now, I know she's not on social media a lot, but I do know that she was on enough that she made her own posts occasionally, and she also liked other family members' posts and commented occasionally. So I'm sure she had to know about those trips. And then at the same time, it was my birthday, and she forgot my birthday. And I'm not a big birthday person, but that is just not like her. So with all those, and to top it off, she never messaged again. It was that one text out of the blue. Look, I bought a house. Be happy for me. And then nothing again. So no, I did not feel welcome. Her obvious distant behavior from me, and her obvious alignment with her sisters, I didn't feel welcome. I'm not trying to make any excuse, but I just didn't feel welcome. Later on, I did apologize for not coming, and I did tell her that I didn't feel welcome. And she explained that she didn't want me to lump her in with her sisters, that she wanted to be her own person. Fair enough. But because of her words and actions, she wasn't being fair. She was aligning with her sisters, and I'll explain that more in a bit. So now fast forward to Christmas time. I had been seeing some posts come through my social media feed, family photos of all my family getting together for the holidays, all except me, and all smiling and all happy. And my middle daughter would make these posts public. And in my opinion, she did that so I would see them, because she had unfriended me way back when our estrangement happened. So those photos would come through my feed, and I felt like it was being rubbed in, and those posts would trigger me. And then there was a post my middle daughter made on her page, which she also made public, goo-goo gagaing over an elderly aunt of hers who she considered to be her real mom. And so stuff like that really triggered me. And then there was that serious illness that was supposed to be kept a secret from me, and I was having my own similar issues. And just the fact knowing that I didn't have the medical history to let my own doctors know for my own treatment, I just thought was beyond really, really cruel. So as a way to cope, I wrote a Christmas poem. It was a generic poem, not naming any names. I did use terms like brothers and daughters, and I didn't tag anybody. And it was a very emotional poem. I had a lot of tears over it, and it was just a way for me to cope and express myself where I couldn't express myself otherwise. And I put that on my Facebook page. And then I didn't think much of it for a while. Somehow, despite my middle daughter having unfriended me years ago, saw that poem. Now, family gossip, right? Somebody in my family who I was still friends with at the time apparently showed that to her, and it triggered her. And she posted her own posts, which she made public, and tagged a whole ton of family members, even family members who weren't in on the estrangement, all these silent ones. And it was a smear campaign against me. I only read the first sentence enough to know that it was very negative, and as a self-boundary, I chose to not read it, and I never have read it. My youngest daughter, despite claiming to be neutral, decided that this poem was all my fault. And after seeing her comment under that smear campaign post, the only comment that I did read, because she was the only one I was not estranged from at the time, her comment was something about how she's not good at communication herself, or something like that, and that I wonder where I get that from, obviously meaning me. I stupidly figured that, hey, this is the only family member who has the courage to admit that they aren't perfect either. It's not just me that's not perfect, that they're not perfect. And so I mistakenly thought that maybe she would be understanding. I mean, she had always been understanding in the past. So a while later, I'm not sure how long, a month, 2, 3 months, I asked her about it, about her comment, and that was a mistake. Asking her about it is what led to our final estrangement. And again, there's no talking in my family, no talking from anybody on the other side without rudeness and disrespect. And it was no different this time. After she told me that she had listened to her sister's side and that they had valid point, I reminded her that she had asked me not to put her in the middle, and I had respected that, and as such, I never told her my side of the story, and she insisted that I could tell her my side of the story, that it wouldn't be putting her in the middle, but trying to do that only instigated her rudeness and disrespect even more. She said a lot of rude things to me. She said I was being childish, toxic, ridiculous, and that I needed to get over it. Well, you never get over it. She insinuated that because I wrote that poem that I wasn't over it. Well, no, I'm never going to get over it, but I also don't dwell on it and live on it 24/7 or even think about it 24/7. But that's a very dismissive thing to say to somebody. She added things like, since it's the entire family on one side and only me on the other side, that must mean the problem is me. She also made a comment about how because I'm the mother, it's my fault, which is kind of interesting because when your children grow up and become adults, they make up their own mind. And I'm not mom to my brothers and my other family members. So how does being a mom have anything to do with it? I think it's just a stereotypical thing like, oh, if your child has any issues or they're angry with you or they don't want anything to do with you, it must be the parents' fault, right? I'm supposed to be the role model because I'm the mother. Well, yeah, I'm the role model, but once you become an adult, then what? Aren't you the role model for your own self? I'm not your role model anymore. She questioned me if I cared about family, which I found extremely interesting because here my whole family is excluding me. So what does that tell you about who cares about family? In addition, most if not all of my family are MAGA, which I find interesting because although MAGA claims they're all about family, they support an administration who is tearing families apart and attempting to take away the rights of families. Then there was weird stuff like she said, well, I don't think you ever did anything really bad, but I witnessed the disappointment on my nephew's face, meaning my oldest daughter's son, when he did not receive the PlayStation as a gift from you winning that. Well, I never won a PlayStation, so I thought that was odd. I did win a Nintendo Switch at some point, and I decided that was something I wanted to keep at my home for when my grandchildren would come visit so they would have something to do. I didn't know I was expected to give that to him as a gift, and besides, his mom had told me they were buying him a new gaming system for Christmas. So I thought that was really weird. The biggest thing was when she told me that, hey, I'm thinking about marrying my boyfriend, but if I do, I wouldn't be able to invite you. And she insinuated that I would be an issue, or I would cause issues around her sisters if she invited me. She said it would really suck, but she couldn't invite me. So I'm smiling and laughing, but it's so hypocritical because her sisters are the ones who started the issues in the first place and refused to work them out. With that poem that I wrote, she casted me out as the bad one, never considering the things that the family were doing to me to cause me the need to express my feelings. So in I guess this year, 2025, sporadic messages with my youngest daughter. I found myself, for reading her disrespectful comments and obviously aligning with her sisters, I found myself with a lot of physical stomach pains, a lot of tears, crying in private. I already suffer from anxiety, and my anxiety was a lot higher, and I don't need that, and it's not healthy for me to feel stressed out. And I did attempt to put some boundaries on her and told her that our conversations needed to be respectful. I said that a couple times, but those comments were met with silence. One day I just woke up and I said, no more. No more. I was going to put me first, and there's nothing wrong in putting me first. I'm not perfect. I'm not trying to make excuses for myself. I've made lots of mistakes. I'm willing to be respectful and work things out. But I wasn't going to spend every other day in absolute tears and stomach pains. And I made the difficult decision to block my entire family on social media. Well, I left a few, like distant cousins and such. And then I wrote my youngest daughter a email, which I sent her. And I explained to her that I was going to step back. And I did tell her that she's not teaching any future generations or her future children a better way, which was something that she did say to me, that she was trying to change things up for the future. I wished her well and happiness and health, and told her I'd always be available if she could approach me with respect. And that was several months ago, and that was that. I'm sure all three of my girls have their own versions of events, which is fine. I'm just trying to relate what happened from my personal perspective. There's so much more when it pertains to my daughters, how it makes me feel, how I'm coping, why I think it happened, and how it has changed me. So I hope you're all doing well and having a great day, and I will see you in the next video.